When I'm talking to people, they normally ask me, why is tiny Luxembourg engaging in such a huge initiative? Why are we going into space? Why do we want, as a tiny country, develop space as an economy or new space economy? Well, I always tell them, you have to know the history of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, the economic history of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg in order to understand what we are doing right now. And I normally try to explain in a few words what the history, the economic history of Luxembourg is. Actually, when we got independent in the year 1839, we were a really poor farmers' country. A very poor country where 1/3 of the population left the country because they didn't see any future in this country and they didn't believe in the future of this country. And that was true until the end of the 19th century, until we found iron ore in Luxembourg. But then we had one big problem because we didn't have the engineers to develop a mining and a steel industry, nor did we have the money in order to develop this steel industry and this mining industry. So the government of that time took a very wise but a very important decision at that time, namely to open the borders to foreign workers, but also open the borders to foreign capital in order to build up this mining industry, to build up this steel industry, which became one of the biggest steel industries in Europe. And that was true until the 1970s, when there was a huge decline in the steel industry. And then the government or the country had to reinvent itself, and the economy had to reinvent itself, because we needed to find a new activity, a new economic activity for the future, because we saw that steel industry was in decline. And at that time, the government thought that building up a financial center, Luxembourg as a financial center, could be a good idea. But you have to know that at that time we had a few Luxembourgish commercial banks over here, but that was it. Nobody really believed in Luxembourg becoming a financial center. But the government did, and the government took the right measures, put in place legal framework, and all kind of decisions were taken in order to make Luxembourg an attractive financial center. And nowadays, I guess I don't have to tell you that this was a huge success. In the 1980s, we had another, let's say, foolish idea, because we said that we should diversify our economy. We should not rely too much only on the financial sector. And we decided that satellite TV could be an interesting thing to do, because nobody did that until that time. And the government was really engaged in developing these activities and putting in place a company called SES, which all of you know today. But at that time, again, nobody believed in that new idea, because nobody saw the need for satellite TV. When you look at the discussions we had in Parliament, I say we, I was a child at that time, but the discussions in Parliament at that time are quite funny if you read them today, because members of Parliament said, who needs satellite TV? We've got our 6 TV channels over here, and on Sundays we have Hayalai Kugelai, which the Luxembourgish should know, the others don't. And that's fine. Nobody needs this. We have antennas on our roofs, and we have 6 TV channels. So why should we need satellite TV? Why should we need more TV channels? But the government, together with some entrepreneurs, believed in these ideas, and they put in place this company. And I can tell you that when in 1985 they sent the first satellite into space, there was no insurance company in the world who wanted to give an insurance on this first launch, because it was too risky to them, and they didn't want to take over this risk. That was the time when the government again took a very important decision. It gave a state guarantee on this launch. But this state guarantee, you have to imagine, amounted to nearly 5% of the total annual budget of the government. So that was a huge risk. But the government took that risk. And the result is that nowadays SES is one of the most important commercial satellite operators in the world. In the 1990s, to give you another funny example, we said, okay, we need some more diversification of our economy. And one of these new ideas was to have a maritime pavilion. Luxembourg being a landlocked country, having a maritime pavilion sounded quite foolish. And you know, I met the Belgian king 2 years ago, and he was wondering why Luxembourg had a maritime pavilion being a landlocked country. And I told him, you know, that's because the Luxembourg governments are really very wise, and they are always planning long into the future. And with climate change, you know, one day we will have access to the sea. He was not that amused about this, because he said that would mean that Belgium will have to disappear. I said, well, that's the price to pay for it. But, you know, that was one other foolish ideas. But then we had more normal ideas, like diversifying our economy into ICT, into logistics, into automotive, into health tech, biotech, etc. When I became minister some 8 years ago, Minister of the Economy some 8 years ago, I said that, well, you know, everybody's doing that. Everybody's trying to diversify into this sector. So we need something where we are the first movers. If we want to have a big success as we had with our financial center, with our steel industry, we need a first mover advantage. And so we should try to find something completely new and something where we will be one of the leaders in the development. And that was the time when the idea came up of this space resource initiative. An initiative which many of my fellow citizens don't really understand, because it is quite complex to understand what we are doing. And I hope that after this panel you will understand a little bit better what we are doing. But you know, when we're talking to all these companies, all these startups around the world which were active in new space, in the new space economy, we found out that it needs several things, several ingredients to become successful as a space resource, as a space mining country. First of all, we put in place a legal framework allowing companies to do business in space. Second, we needed research and development grants in order to help these companies to develop their research activities. Then we said that we would need the university to have a master's degree in space resources, or space master degree, which we put in place since this September. We had 8 times more applications from all over the world than we could accept students to this space master. So it shows that the interest is there. 1 year ago, we put in place a Luxembourg Space Agency with the aim to help all these new startups, new space companies to develop their activities, to get access to ESA programs, to other programs. But we are now planning, and I think before the end of this year, we will put in place this venture capital fund, because that's something really important to these startups, because they have good ideas, but they need capital as well in order to develop them. And that's why we're going to have a public-private partnership between private investors and the government, or the government of Luxembourg, and that will be put in place at the end of this year. So I think that we created more or less everything around this new economy in order to make it happen, in order to help these companies, these startups to develop their activities. Nowadays, since we launched our activity, nowadays we can count more than 50 companies in the space business over here in Luxembourg, and space amounts to 2% of our total GDP, which is the highest share, at least in the European Union. I don't know for the rest of the world, but in the European Union is the highest share of space activities in the total GDP of our country. So that shows that there's really an interest. There are many companies in our pipeline, more than 100 companies which we have in the pipeline which are interested either to develop their activities here in Luxembourg or to partner with the Luxembourgish companies and Luxembourg institutions. What's more, we signed many agreements with different countries which are interested to work together with us, because they see that what we are doing is really interesting and they want to cooperate with us. The latest one we signed, and I would even say the most important one we signed, was the one with the United States of America. And I thank Ambassador Evans for his help, because without him that would not have happened. And you must imagine that the Secretary of Commerce of the United States of America, Mr. Wilbur Ross, came to Luxembourg, especially to sign this agreement with me, and flew back to Washington. Normally, you have to know that if we sign agreements with the United States, we fly to the United States. And we sign with some undersecretary. But the minister came himself to Luxembourg just to sign this agreement. And I was wondering why he did so. And he told me, you know, you're the only guys in the European Union who really understand what will happen in the next 20, 30, 40 years up there in space. And we want to partner with you because we need partners in the European Union in order to develop this. Next week, I'm going to be, together, by the way, with Ambassador Evans, I'm going to be in the United States, in Washington, and we are going to sign an agreement of cooperation with NASA and also an agreement of cooperation with the German Space Agency. It shows that there is a huge interest in what we are doing, and we are really, you know, pushing to develop this. And, you know, I know that the economic, let's say the government will not earn money with this initiative in the short term. But that's not the plan. The plan is to build up this new economy to be ready for the time when it will happen. And I'm pretty sure that this will really be a huge advantage for Luxembourg in the future if we develop this. I just want to make a parenthesis because that's always some kind of critics. Ethics in space is really important to the government of Luxembourg, and we are working on this. We are trying to define criteria how you can do business in space, what you do have to respect in space, in order not to copy actually the mistakes we did on Earth during industrialization of our planet. So we really try to do this in a very responsible way. Having said that, I can tell you that already nowadays Luxembourg takes more space in space than on Earth. I know that's not that difficult, but I'm pretty sure as well that Luxembourgish might become the official language in space if we continue like that. Having said that, I want to thank you again for being here tonight. Wish you a really interesting discussion with these guys who are really the experts and who will explain you a little bit more in detail what will happen in space in the future. And then last but not least, have fun with the movie. Thank you so much.